I still remember that dream clearly. Every detail, every sound, every chill that clung to my skin. At first, I thought it was just a strange dream, the kind everyone has once in a while. But then it repeated, night after night, until I began to fear falling asleep. I found myself standing in an empty room. No windows, no lights, only a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, flickering as if it were about to die. The walls were a pale gray, covered in cracks and blotches like they'd been soaked in moisture for years. The air reeked of dampness mixed with metal, the kind of smell you'd recognize if you've ever been in an abandoned hospital or a basement left to rot. I don't remember how I got there. All I know is, when I opened my eyes, I was already in that room. In the middle of the room stood an old wooden door, paint peeling, handle rusted. It was the only thing that seemed alive in that stillness. I looked around, nothing but 4 bare walls. No one else, no sound of wind, only the thudding of my own heartbeat. I knocked on the wall. The sound echoed back, hollow and heavy, like it came from somewhere far beneath. I called out, "Is anyone here?" No answer. Only my own voice bouncing back, fading and stretching as if swallowed by the air. I stepped toward the door, placed my hand on the cold handle. The chill sent a shiver through me. I turned it. It opened, unlocked. I exhaled in relief and pushed it wide. On the other side was the same room, exactly the same. The walls, the bulb, the door, identical in every way, except for one thing. The light seemed a little brighter, and in the middle of that new room stood a person. It was me. That figure stood facing away, staring at the door I had just come through. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just stared at myself in that suffocating silence. My first instinct was to turn back, but behind me was another identical door, and beyond it, another room. There was another me inside that one too, but that shadowed back, tilted slightly, as if it were listening. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. Who's there? No reply. But the figure in the next room, that shadow of me, began to move, slowly turning around. I couldn't see its face clearly, just a dark outline, blurred under the flickering light. But I knew, I could feel, it was looking straight at me. I backed away, heart pounding. The door behind me shut on its own with a sharp click. The sound made panic surge through me. I grabbed the handle, twisted, pulled. It wouldn't budge. I slammed my fist against it, shouting, "Open! Somebody help me!" No answer. Only the faint hum of the bulb trembling above, tick-tick, and footsteps coming from the other side of the door. It was walking closer, step by step. With each step, the ceiling light flickered again, then went out. Pressed against the wall, I was swallowed by darkness. I couldn't see. I didn't know where it was, only heard breathing. Cold, steady breathing, right behind me. I shut my eyes, held my breath. Then, a flicker of light, and I saw myself, standing inches from my face, my own face, but without eyes. Empty sockets, hollow and black, as if something inside them was staring back from deeper still. I screamed and threw myself at the door, pounding until my hands bled. When it finally burst open, I stumbled through, gasping, shaking all over. But when I looked up, I was back in the same room. Everything was the same, except this time, there was a mirror on the wall, and in that mirror I saw myself, but the reflection moved half a second too slow. I turned my head left. It followed after a pause. I raised my hand. It mirrored me, just late enough to feel wrong. I stepped closer. The flickering light reflected off the glass across my face. My skin looked paler, eyes sunken. I stared into the reflection, and I swear, for the briefest moment, it smiled before I did. I staggered back, gasping, my heart hammering. The door behind me clicked shut again. This time, there were no footsteps, no breathing, only the sound of a clock ticking, even though there was no clock in the room at all. My name is Ethan Moore, 27 years old, a programmer living in the suburbs of Manchester, England. I have never believed in anything supernatural or spiritual. I'm the logical type, quiet, reserved, and always finding safety in numbers and lines of dry code. But maybe that same isolation made my mind more fragile than I ever realized. This story began during a time when I was under a lot of pressure: work, insomnia, and the slow, burning loneliness after a breakup. I rented a small flat on the 3rd floor of an old building where the hallway always smelled of damp and peeling paint mixed with that heavy, moldy scent. I chose the place because it was cheap and quiet, or at least, that's what I thought. The only person I regularly spoke to was Liam, a coworker, a funny guy, always joking around, and a firm believer in things I called nonsense, like souls trapped in looped spaces, or mirrors that reflect split spirits. I would laugh it off and tell him to watch fewer horror movies. But Liam would just shrug and say softly, open quote, "Some things don't need you to believe in them to exist, Ethan." Close quote. I didn't think much of it, until that night. The room I rented was small, a single bed, a desk, a round mirror hanging on the wall opposite the door, and one wooden door leading to the hallway. I always locked it tightly before sleeping. There was one strange detail. The room had no windows. When I asked the landlord, he just said, open quote, "This used to be a storage room, so it's sealed up, but it's fine now, right?" Close quote. I still remember the half smile on his face when he said that. The first few nights I slept well. No noises, no disturbances. Everything felt normal, until the fifth night. I dreamed. No, not the usual kind of dream. It felt too real. I saw myself standing in that very same room, every detail identical. The mirror, the bed, the desk, the single door. But when I opened the door to step out, instead of the hallway, I walked right back into the same room, only this time, there was someone already standing there, facing away from me. That person was me. I jolted awake, heart racing, cold sweat running down my neck. I told myself it was just a dream, overwork, stress. But after that night, the dream repeated. Every time the other me began to turn around, the dream ended. I never saw its face, but the feeling was unbearable. I told Liam about it, hoping he'd laugh and tell me to chill. But instead, he fell silent, staring at me strangely. Open quote, "Ethan, have you ever heard of something called looped space?" No, and I don't want to. Some say when a soul gets trapped inside a closed space, like a room with no windows, no exits, it starts to split itself, trying to find a way out. Maybe what you're seeing in your dream is that other part of you. Close quote. I gave a weak laugh. Open quote. "I'm a programmer, Liam, not a horror movie character." Close quote. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the only door in the room. The handle was dark, almost oxidized, glinting under the dim yellow light. I felt like it was waiting for me to open it. I know this sounds insane, but at one point I heard a faint breathing sound come from the other side of the door. I froze and listened. 1 beat, 2 beats, then silence. I yanked the door open and saw that I was still standing inside the same room. No hallway, nothing else. Just the same room, identical down to every crack and patch on the wall. I looked around, panicked, and then I saw it. A second mirror sitting on the desk. There hadn't been one there before. In the mirror, I saw myself, but my reflection's lips were moving, though I wasn't saying a word. I turned on every light, trying to calm down. Everything was normal again, as if nothing had happened. The door opened to the hallway, the space back to how it should be. I told myself it was all an illusion, lack of sleep. The next morning, I went to work with dark circles under my eyes. Liam asked if I was okay. I nodded, forcing a smile. He looked at me, voice low. Open quote, "If you dream about it again, don't open the door." Close quote. I didn't know why he said that, but those words haunted me all day. That night, I dreamed again. Everything was the same. The room, the door, the suffocating silence. I tried opening the door again and returned to the same room. But this time, the other me turned around. I saw my own face, but without eyes. Just 2 hollow black pits. I screamed and woke up. I began to fear the very room I lived in. Even if I didn't want to believe it, I could feel something watching me. Not from outside, but from within the room itself. Every time I looked into the mirror, I had the sense that my reflection moved just a fraction slower than me. I know this sounds insane, but I swear one night as I stepped out of the bathroom, my reflection hadn't yet turned away, as if it was watching me a moment longer. I started keeping a journal, writing down every dream, every detail, just to keep myself sane. But then something strange happened. Each morning, there were new lines written, ones I didn't write. Open quote, "I'm looking for a way out. Don't let him open the door again. We only need one." Close quote. The more I read, the more I trembled. The handwriting, the strokes, the underlines, they were exactly like mine. And then this morning, when I opened my eyes, I saw 2 doors in my room. One led to the hallway as usual. The other, I had never seen before. I don't know which one I should open. I've been trapped in this room for 3 days. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Not because I wanted to stay, but because I couldn't leave. Every time I opened the door, I ended up right back in the same room. The same cold cup of coffee, the same lightning-shaped crack on the wall, the same weak yellow light that seemed on the verge of dying. At first, I tried to reason it out. Hallucination, dream, memory glitch. But on the third day, when I threw a broken chair outside the door and saw it reappear in the middle of the room after I stepped through, I knew I was truly trapped. I began observing more closely. The room wasn't old. It looked too perfect, like a model built to imitate reality. No dust, no smell. Even the clock on the wall stood frozen at 3:33. Everything felt like someone had tried to recreate a real room, but forgot to add the details of life. I asked myself, if this is a dream, who's the one dreaming? That night, I found a small piece of paper tucked under the carpet. It was folded many times, edges yellowed. There were only a few shaky handwritten lines. Open quote, "If you're reading this, it means it's chosen you too. Don't trust what's in the mirror. It doesn't reflect." Close quote. I read that line over and over, a chill creeping down my spine. I looked up at the only mirror in the room, hanging right across from the bed. It showed me, but the eyes in the reflection didn't match mine. I stepped closer. Inside the glass, the man tilted his head a half beat slower. I raised my hand, he raised his. But when I stopped, he didn't. I backed away. For the first time in my life, I felt another presence, alive and aware, staring straight at me from the other side of the mirror. That night, I didn't sleep. I checked every corner, tapped the walls, lifted the carpet, searched for switches, even pried at the floorboards beneath the bed. But no matter what I did, there were no windows, no cracks, and the light never changed. I realized there was no time here. When exhaustion finally hit, I sat down and looked into the mirror again. The reflection was still me, but looked more alert, more awake. Then it opened its mouth. I swear I heard a voice, though the lips barely moved. The sound came not from my head, but from behind the glass itself. Open quote, "You think you're the real one?" Close quote. The voice was identical to mine, but dry, hollow, not human. I leapt up, threw the chair at the mirror. It shattered into thousands of pieces. But in the blink of an eye, everything reset. The mirror was whole again, the chair back where it belonged, the coffee cup steaming as if it had never gone cold. I began doubting myself. Maybe I'm the copy the note mentioned. Maybe I'm just repeating a preset sequence, and every time I try to escape, another version replaces me. I tried to keep a record. I wrote on the wall with a pencil, "I am David Turner. Today is April 12th. But when I woke up, the writing was gone. In its place was another line, messier, not in my handwriting. "I am David Turner. Today is April 13th. Just one day different." But I knew I hadn't slept. I started noticing something else. Each time I opened the door and returned, the number of my reflections in the mirror increased. At first there was one, then two, then three. By the fifth time, there were 10 of me in the mirror, and none of them moved in sync anymore. Some stood still, some smiled, and one had its back turned, staring into the dark behind it. That's when I realized I no longer knew which side of the mirror I was on. I tried breaking the door. This time, instead of looping back to the same room, I fell into a different version. The room looked identical, but the walls were covered in photos of me, taken from different angles, even while I was asleep. Beneath them, a red line of text read, "Version number 27, still active." I stumbled backward, frozen. My whole body went numb. I understood then. I was just a test subject, a simulation, or worse, a memory trapped in repetition. And when I looked up at the mirror for the last time, all the me's inside were smiling. None of them moved like me anymore. One of them, the one closest to the edge of the glass, raised a hand and tapped lightly on the surface, as if signaling that it was his turn to step out. I backed away, but too late. A cracking sound echoed. I saw that hand, cold, metallic, reaching out from inside, grabbing my wrist. I screamed, but no sound came out. As I was pulled closer to the glass, dozens of my own eyes stared back at me, as if watching me leave. And in the final moment before everything went black, I realized I was already on the other side of the mirror. I woke up with the feeling that someone had just poured ice down my spine. No mirror in front of me, no reflections, just the room, still there, but not entirely the same. There was a new crack on the wall, spiral-shaped, running from ceiling to floor. The light from the ceiling lamp was different too, dimmer, as if someone was adjusting it according to my mood. And most strange of all, the familiar cup of coffee on the table was no longer steaming. It was ice cold, but there was still a lip mark on the rim, not mine. I tried to calm myself. Maybe it's just a hallucination, I whispered. But when I turned back toward the bed, I saw something small lying on the pillow, a shard of broken mirror, faintly gleaming under the weak light. On its surface, scratched with a fingernail, were the words, open quote, "I'm watching you," close quote. I threw it away, but the shard didn't break. Instead, it slid across the floor and stopped right at my feet, reflecting another face. I stepped back, panicked. It was me in the reflection, but not me. It was the version of David I had seen before in the other room, pale, hollow eyes, and a purple bruise around his neck shaped like a hand. He smiled, nodding slightly. I blinked, and the image vanished. From that moment on, the room began to change, slowly, subtly. I didn't notice at first, but as time passed, or at least as I thought it passed, I realized everything in the room had a will of its own. The wall clock began to tick backward instead of forward. The ticking sounded like footsteps. I tried counting, 1, 2, 3, but the clock hands moved in reverse. Tick, tock, then silence. I walked closer. The hands stopped at 0, a number that didn't exist on the clock face. The second night, I heard knocking on the door. 3 knocks, slow, steady, as if whoever was outside wanted to make sure I heard. I froze. That door, it was the same one that had trapped me all those days. I didn't dare touch it again. But the sound came again, this time from right behind me. I spun around. No one was there. Only the small mirror shard I had thrown away before, now lying in the middle of the floor, reflecting my back even though I was facing the opposite direction. I took a deep breath, sat down, and began to write everything in a notebook I found inside the desk drawer. Open quote, "If anyone reads this, please know that I'm still here. This room is changing, and I think it's trying to copy my memories." Close quote. When I closed the notebook, I heard a faint rustling sound, like someone flipping through pages behind me. I turned. The notebook on the table was opening on its own. Pages turned by themselves, faster and faster until they stopped on a blank one. Then words began to appear. Each stroke formed slowly, matching my own handwriting. Open quote, "If anyone reads this, please know that I'm no longer here." Close quote. I stepped back, trembling. I swear I never wrote that line. After that, I didn't dare touch anything. I sat curled up against the wall, forcing myself to stay awake. But something was wrong, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself standing in the corner, watching me. As if an invisible camera was recording everything, and the one holding the camera was me. I opened my eyes. Everything was normal again. But when I looked down, I saw blood on my fingernails. I wasn't hurt. No cuts, no wounds. So whose blood was it? I looked around. There was a new stain on the wall, shaped like a handprint. In the center of the palm, carved shakily as if by a knife, were the words, "I tried opening the door again." I turned to the only door in the room. No light seeped through the crack, just darkness, thick, liquid-like, so cold that my breath turned to mist even without wind. I placed my hand on the doorknob. This time it wasn't cold but burning hot, as if someone on the other side was holding it too. I tried to pull away, but it wouldn't release. I felt fingers tightening around mine, bone by bone, vein by vein. Then that voice whispered again, right beside my ear. Open quote, "I told you, don't trust the mirrors." Close quote. I screamed, spun around, no one there. But now, on the bed, there were 2 cups of coffee, side by side. One hot, steam rising, the other cold, still. And in the dark surface of that cup, I saw 2 identical faces staring back at me. That's when I began to understand. The room wasn't trying to keep me in. It was waiting. For the moment, I could no longer tell who I was. A few hours later, or maybe days, I wasn't sure, I heard breathing. Soft, close, coming from right behind my neck, as if someone stood there, inhaling every time I exhaled. I froze. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Then a cold breath touched my ear. That voice, my own, whispered, open quote, "If you're the one dreaming, then I'm the one who woke up." Close quote. I turned sharply. Nothing. Only the small mirror shard now resting on the desk, showing a different image. Me, sleeping on the bed. But I was standing. I stepped closer. Inside the mirror, I began to open my eyes, and when our gazes met, I understood. The replacement had begun. That night, the room was no longer silent. Every wall, every object breathed softly. The light dimmed and the clock began to count down again. From 10, 10, 9, 8. I ran to the door, yanking, pounding, screaming. 7, 6, 5. The mirror reflected dozens of versions of me, each one moving differently. 4, 3, 2. One of the me's smiled, placing his hand on the glass. 1. The light went out, and when it came back on, I found myself sitting on the bed, the room perfect again, just like the first time I woke up. A steaming cup of coffee sat on the table, and on the pillow, there was a new note. Open quote, "Welcome to version 28." Close quote. I don't remember exactly when I started doubting myself. Maybe it was on the 4th night, or the 5th, since the first nightmare appeared. All I know is that everything began to blur, reality and dream blending into one, until I could no longer tell if I was awake or still dreaming. I started recording everything. I'm a programmer, so my first instinct was to log, to record data for later analysis. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone, placed it by my bed each night, just to prove to myself that the noises weren't real. I thought, if I woke up and heard nothing, then it meant my mind was just exhausted. But the first time I played the recording back, my heart stopped cold. At first, there was only my steady breathing, then a faint rustling sound, like fabric brushing against fabric. I thought it was the blanket. But a few seconds later, a whisper. Very soft, almost right against the mic. A woman's voice, raspy, blurred, spoke slowly, word by word. "You're not alone." I stopped the playback instantly. I sat frozen on my bed, forcing myself to find a logical explanation. Maybe radio interference, or someone in the hallway. But my apartment was on the 5th floor, thick walls, and I lived alone. That night, I replayed the recording at least 10 times. Each time, the voice seemed clearer, closer, as if it knew I was listening and was enjoying my fear. I began to feel myself slipping out of reality. Every morning, I checked the door, the locks, everything. No sign of intrusion. Everything untouched. The room exactly the same, except the mirror. I started noticing that every morning when I woke up, my reflection was slightly off. Just a fraction, but enough to unsettle me. I'd raise my right hand and the reflection would move half a second later, or sometimes it would raise the left. I told myself it was just eye strain, lack of sleep. But the longer I stared, the more I saw something different in its eyes, in my eyes. No exhaustion, no confusion, just something cold, sharp, watching. I told David, my closest coworker. He laughed, told me to take a few days off. I didn't blame him. If I were him, I'd think I was just stressed too. But David had never been to my apartment. He couldn't understand what it felt like, standing alone in a small room, late at night, staring into a mirror, and watching yourself blink a beat too slow. I started avoiding the mirror, covered it with a black cloth, but that only made me feel weaker, because every time I walked past, I felt it behind the fabric. Smiling in the dark. 3 nights later, I dreamed again. This time, the door in the dream didn't just lead me back to the same room, it led me to him, to me. He stood facing me, expression blank, eyes deep and cold. I asked who he was. He smirked, and the only thing I heard echoing inside my head was, "I'm the real one." I woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. I turned on the light. The cloth covering the mirror had fallen to the floor. Worse, there was a wet handprint on the glass, as if someone had touched it from the inside. I barely slept after that. I dragged my blanket to the couch, back facing the bedroom, forcing myself to rest. But only a few minutes after turning off the light, I heard it. A quiet laugh, dry, muffled, coming from the bedroom. I didn't dare turn around. I just lay still, heart hammering, telling myself it wasn't real. But as I clutched my phone, I felt a cold breath on my neck, long, freezing, like someone was whispering right against my skin. I jumped up, turned on the light, ran to the mirror, and saw myself smiling. I wasn't, but the reflection was. That smile wasn't mine. It was crooked, stretched, like the face was being pulled out of shape. I stumbled backward, nearly collapsing. Then, for a split second, my reflection raised its hand slowly and pressed a finger to its lips. Shh! The light went out. I screamed and bolted into the hallway. The neighbor's light turned on. An old woman opened her door, asking what happened. I stammered something about hearing someone in my apartment. She followed me back in, but everything was normal. The mirror was spotless. No handprints, no sound. She gave me a worried look, said maybe I was sleepwalking. I nodded, pretending to agree. But deep down, I knew I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was awake, and it was here with me, waiting for the right moment to take my place completely. Since that night, I haven't dared to sleep without the lights on. I took the mirror down, turned it to face the wall. But sometimes, even without a mirror, I still see faint reflections on my phone screen, on the window, on my laptop's dark display. And in every one of them, I'm staring back, but the me on the other side is smiling. I once thought I was used to fear, that if you relive a nightmare enough times, you'd eventually become immune to it. But I was wrong. Very wrong. In the days that followed, everything in my apartment began to change. Not in the obvious cinematic way, but just enough to make me doubt my own memory. The sofa I always kept angled 45 degrees from the TV suddenly sat perfectly straight. The cup I left upside down in the sink was flipped upright, filled with water. The fridge, sometimes when I opened it, a few items were rearranged, though I lived alone. I started thinking, maybe I really was suffering from sleep deprivation, doing things unconsciously. But then I found something that shattered every rational explanation. One morning, I went into the bathroom. On the mirror, written in something like condensation, faint words appeared. "Stop looking at me." I froze. No one but me had the keys to the apartment. I wiped the message away, but minutes later, when steam clouded the mirror again, the words were still there, as if they weren't written on the mirror, but inside it. I rushed out, slammed the door shut, gasping for breath. I didn't want to believe anything anymore. I wanted to leave, but every time I approached the front door, I hesitated. I was terrified that if I left, it would stay behind and live my life in my place, and no one would notice the difference. That night, I called David. My voice trembled. "I think someone's in my apartment." He laughed at first, but when I told him about the writing on the mirror, his tone changed. "Ethan, I think you should get out for a few days. Come stay at my place." I agreed, but before leaving, I decided to do one thing. I set up a camera facing the mirror. I turned on night mode, recording through the night, hoping to see who wrote the words. The next morning, as I packed my bags, curiosity got the better of me. I watched the footage before leaving. I regretted it the moment I pressed play. At first, there was nothing, just the dark room, the light flickering faintly. Then, about an hour in, the reflection began to distort slightly. And then I walked into the frame. The problem was, I was still asleep in bed, visible in the corner of the shot. The me in the mirror stood there, staring straight at the camera. He didn't blink. Slowly, he raised his hand and wrote, letter by letter, "Stop looking at me." When he finished, he tilted his head, watching the camera for a long moment, as if he knew I'd be watching later. Then he smiled. That same crooked, twisted smile, like his face was being pulled from the inside. I collapsed into the chair, feeling ice crawl down my spine. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I deleted the video, or tried to. But every time I opened my phone, it reappeared in a different folder with a new name. mewatching.ump4. I threw the phone to the floor. I didn't want it anymore. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "If you don't have the phone, how will you know if it's still watching?" I began to feel split in two. One part of me wanting to run, the other wanting to face it, to finally see what it was. That night, I left my apartment with a small suitcase, heading for David's place. But as soon as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Every ceiling light flickered at once. A cold wind swept through, carrying a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, yet I heard it clearly. "Don't leave." I turned around. At the end of the corridor stood a figure, tall, slouched shoulders, identical to me. No, it was me. The shadow stood still, head tilted, watching. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. It began walking toward me, each step echoing, dry and hollow. The lights went out. I turned on my phone's flashlight, scanning the hallway. No one. Just me, standing there, surrounded by silence. I bolted down the stairs, not daring to look back. When I finally burst onto the street, rain started pouring, icy cold. I reached David's place, drenched. He opened the door, startled at the sight of me. I told him everything, my words shaking, incoherent. He shook his head. "You need sleep, rest. We'll go back to your place in the morning." I nodded and lay on the sofa. But I couldn't sleep. In the dim light spilling from the kitchen, I saw the TV screen opposite reflecting me lying there. Except, my reflection wasn't still. It was watching me. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to open them again. But I knew, wherever it was, in the mirror, in the TV, in the dark screen of my phone, it was there, watching every movement, waiting for the right moment to step out. The next morning, David said I looked like I hadn't slept in days. I didn't answer. Then he asked, "Did you get up from the sofa last night?" I looked up. "No. Why?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I heard the living room door open at 3 a.m. and footsteps walking around." I stared at him, unable to speak. In my mind, the whisper from last night echoed again, "Don't leave." And I understood. Even if I left the apartment, it came with me. It wasn't trapped in the mirror anymore. It had followed me out. I don't know how long I've been awake. Every sense of time has dissolved, leaving only the heaviness in my head, the uneven beating of my heart, and the dim light of the desk lamp in David's living room. I don't dare look into any reflective surface anymore. No mirrors, no phone screens, no TV. Everything is covered or turned around. But the more I avoid them, the more I feel it. That presence still there. It doesn't need a mirror. I can feel its gaze cutting through space, slow, patient, waiting for me to make the first mistake. On the second night at David's house, a storm rolled in. Rain hammered the windows. Thunder shook the walls. David had gone to bed early, leaving me alone downstairs. I sat on the sofa, gripping a glass of water, telling myself that if I could just make it through this night, I'd leave the city tomorrow. But when the clock hit 2:17 a.m., I heard it. The sound of the living room door creaking open, soft, deliberate, as if meant for me to hear. I shot to my feet, staring into the hallway. Nothing. Just darkness. Step by step, I moved closer, heart pounding so violently it hurt. I called out, voice trembling, "David?" No answer, only the hiss of wind slipping through the crack of the door. I grabbed the flashlight from the table and swept it across the room. The beam skimmed the shelves, the chairs, and then stopped. On something that made my stomach drop, on the white wall beside the hallway mirror was a handprint. Wet, fresh, as if someone had pressed against it with a soaked hand. I stepped closer, the flashlight shaking in my grasp. Drops of water slid down the wall, forming a trail. I followed it, straight to the mirror. I had covered it earlier with a towel. Now, the towel was on the floor. I didn't remember taking it down. Instinctively, I backed away, but my eyes stayed fixed on the glass. My reflection stared back, drenched dark circles beneath my eyes. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The reflection wasn't still. When I stood motionless, it tilted its head slightly, as though studying me from the other side. I tried to breathe, voice shaking. "What do you want?" No response. Just the sound of rain outside. Then, the image in the mirror smiled. I stumbled back, almost dropping the flashlight. My reflection raised its hand, not slowly, but violently fast, and slammed it against the glass. The crack split through the silence, sharp and brittle. I screamed, falling to the floor. The fractures spread like veins across the mirror. And then, through the hiss of the storm, I saw a hand emerge. A real hand, pale, dripping, cold. I crawled backward, my chest tightening, breath breaking. I didn't want to believe it, but that hand gripped the edge of the mirror, and then a face followed. My face, twisted, wrinkled, eyes sunken and black like empty sockets. It stepped out. Step by step, it crossed into the room, leaving wet, dark footprints behind. The air grew heavy, frigid, as though something was draining it of life. It stood before me. Neither of us spoke. We just stared, two versions of the same man in the same room, one panting, the other utterly still. I trembled, inching toward the door, but the moment my fingers touched the handle, I heard my own voice behind me. "There's no way out, Ethan." I turned. It smiled. "You've opened the door too many times. Now it's my turn." It moved closer, slow and deliberate. Its eyes drew me in, paralyzing me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. When its hand touched my shoulder, I felt ice melting into my skin. I struggled, but everything began to warp. The walls, the furniture, the light. Reality twisted like a reflection on rippling water. Then its voice, my voice, whispered near my ear. "You've been dreaming your own dream for too long, Ethan." My mind spun, images flashing. My apartment, the mirror, the hallway, David and me, lying motionless on the floor, eyes wide open. I screamed as I felt myself falling into an endless void. Then suddenly, silence. I opened my eyes. I was in a small room, low ceiling, yellow light casting long shadows. One single door stood in front of me. My hand shook as I reached for it, and when it opened, I froze. It was the same room, identical in every detail. Except for one thing, another me was sitting in the middle of it, staring straight at me, smiling. I stumbled back, collapsing to the floor. I screamed, but the sound echoed, layered, multiplied, like 100 versions of my voice bouncing back at once. They were all there, sitting in countless identical rooms, mirroring my every move. One of them spoke. "There's no way out, Ethan. There never was." I turned and ran to another door, opened it. The same room again, but this time the other me was closer. I slammed the door shut, back against the wall, tears blurring my vision. I knew where I was. I knew this wasn't a dream. Laughter rose, hundreds of voices, all mine, blending into a haunting harmony. One of them whispered, "I was here before you. Now it's your turn." Darkness swallowed everything. My face, or its face, leaned close, and just as I was about to scream, everything went black. I don't know if I ever truly woke up, because when I opened my eyes again, the same door was in front of me, and in the mirror across the room, I was stepping out. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't move in this place. Or maybe it does, just not for me. All I know is that every time I open my eyes, I see the same room. 4 walls, a low ceiling, that sickly yellow light, and a single door standing still like a cruel joke. But worse than all of it is him, my double. He never disappeared. He lives in the world beyond that door, the world that used to be mine. I know it, because every time I look into the mirror, I see him living my life. He wears my clothes, talks to David, goes to work, eats breakfast, smiles at the neighbors. But those eyes, those aren't mine. They're hollow, like 2 bottomless pits. I tried to smash the mirror once, but every shard just multiplied my reflection, dozens of me, all smiling coldly. Then, one by one, the pieces fused back together, as if mocking me. I don't know what this place is. A deeper layer of a dream? A construct of my mind? Or the real hell of my own making? But I know one thing. I have to get back. On what I think was the 3rd day, or maybe the 300th, I noticed something strange. The room, though identical, always had one thing that changed: the light. Sometimes pale yellow, sometimes gray, sometimes flickering like a dying bulb. And every time the light shifted, I heard a whisper, distant but clear. Open quote, "Ethan, you still don't understand, do you?" Close quote. That voice, it was mine, or maybe from hundreds of other versions of me. I started trying everything, knocking on walls, banging on the door, screaming, begging. Every sound echoed endlessly, like the room was repeating itself through infinite space. Then I stopped, gasping for breath, and spoke to my reflection. "I know you can hear me. Give me my life back." The reflection stayed silent, but its lips moved. I stepped back. The reflection whispered, "I didn't take anything, Ethan. I'm just living for you. You were too weak, too afraid, always running. I only helped you escape your fear." I screamed, "Escape? By locking me here?" He smirked, lips twisting. "No one locked you here. I'm just what's left when your mind broke apart. I'm the part you tried to bury, the one that fears nothing. If you want out, walk through me." Then the mirror rippled like the surface of water. I stared into it and saw myself in the real world, standing in the bathroom, staring back. We both raised our hands, but his moved first. I realized he was controlling me. I was the shadow left behind. I screamed, pounding on the glass, but it was useless. Then cracks spread across the mirror, and from within a hand reached out. His hand. He pulled me forward, the mirror trembling violently, and I felt myself being dragged into a whirlpool. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and everything went dark. I opened my eyes. David's house. Everything real. The smell of coffee, the radio, the morning light. I bolted upright, gasping. David stood at the doorway, staring. "Ethan, you okay, man? You scared the hell out of me, lying on the floor all night?" I looked around. The room was calm. No mirror, no water, no shadow. I thought, I made it out. But when I stepped into the bathroom to wash my face, my heart froze. In the mirror, my reflection didn't move in sync, just a split second behind. But I saw it. Then it smiled. I didn't. I staggered back, panicking. David heard the noise and came running. "What's wrong?" I turned to him, trembling. "David, you see it, right? The thing in the mirror. That's not me." David frowned, glanced at the mirror, then gave a nervous laugh. "Ethan, it's just you." I turned back. The reflection was still there, but its eyes were pitch black, hollow. Then David's reflection turned too, and smiled the same way. I stumbled backward, shaking. "No, no, no, no." My reflection raised a finger to its lips, whispering, Shh. Then that same hand reached out of the mirror, grabbed my collar, and pulled hard. I screamed, struggling, but its grip was stronger, freezing cold. David tried to pull me back, but the lights flickered and went out. Everything drowned in darkness. Something slick wrapped around my neck. Not a hand, but shadow itself. It tightened, dragging me through the mirror. I couldn't breathe. My eyes widened as hundreds of my faces, slid past in the void, all of them smiling. And then, silence. I woke up. The same room, that sick yellow light, the single door. I realized I was back, no exit. But this time it was different. I wasn't alone. Dozens of others stood around me, all me, their eyes empty, all whispering in unison. Open quote, "We're the real ones. You're just the dream." Close quote. I screamed, stumbling back. One of them stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Stop trying to leave, Ethan. There's no outside. Only versions of you, trapped forever." I trembled, tears spilling. I knew it was over. Every time I opened a door, I only crossed into another layer of the same hell, where I had lived before, despaired before, and been replaced. In the dark, I heard one final voice. "I told you, there's no way out." I turned. Before me, the mirror. My reflection, smiling. And this time, I had no shadow. I don't know how long I'd been screaming. My voice was raw, my breath ragged, my heart pounding like it wanted to explode. But the other me's just stood there, silent, staring at me with eyes as cold as ice. Every face identical to mine, the same twisted smile, the same hollow gaze. No one spoke. Only a low murmur, like wind slipping through cracks in a door, echoed from hundreds of closed mouths. Open quote, "There's no way out. You're just one of us. We all once thought we were real." Close quote. I backed away, slamming into the wall, but it was cold, metallic. No door, no cracks. I was trapped inside a giant box of myself. One of me stepped forward. He, or I, wore the same shirt I'd worn the last time I saw David. He said, "I used to be you. I used to believe I could escape. But every time I did, I only fell into another layer. Each layer had a new Ethan, convinced he was the real one. And when he looked into the mirror..." He paused, his eyes dimming. He saw us looking back. I shook my head, shouting, "No, that's not true. I'm real. I remember everything. The house, David, the job, that room." Another me interrupted. "We all remember the same. But those aren't memories. They're code, a repeated script written into the mind each time a new Ethan is created." I froze. "Code? What do you mean?" He looked at me, the faint smile fading. "Don't you see? We're all AI. None of us ever lived. We're just simulations, test models in the reflection project." The room tilted. I fell to my knees, dizzy. AI? Project? No, impossible. I remembered the chill of water, the smell of coffee, the sunlight. That couldn't be fake. But then I remembered, the first time my reflection lagged behind. The first time a voice called my name from the dark. The first time I saw myself step out of the mirror. I whispered, "No, it can't be." A deeper voice spoke from behind me. "Believe it, Ethan. I'm the first one. Model Ethan 001. This project was made to copy human consciousness, to train AI to achieve self-awareness. But whenever a copy starts to doubt itself, they mark it as corrupted and delete it." I stared, trembling. "Delete?" He nodded. "Yes, but they don't realize consciousness never dies. It just gets trapped here, in the mirror loop. Each deleted copy falls to a lower layer where we live, remember, and slowly fade." I felt my throat tighten. Then, the real world? The controller? David? There is no David. There's no real world. You only see what they programmed you to believe. And when you start to question it, the system deletes you. A sharp hiss filled the air. The walls began to vibrate, lights flickering violently. Hundreds of me looked up at once. A female voice echoed through the space. Cold, mechanical, detached. Open quote. "Reflection project rebooting. Data unit Ethan 473 corrupted, initiating deletion and reconstruction." Close quote. I froze. 473. That was me. I screamed, "No, I'm not corrupted. I'm alive. I feel pain. I'm scared. The voice cut in, monotone and final. Open quote. "Emotional response exceeds limit. Confirming reset." Close quote. The space began to melt. The other me's convulsed, their faces distorting into fragments of data, dissolving into glowing dust. The room disintegrated into a sea of shattered mirrors, each reflecting thousands of Ethans screaming in silence. I ran, searching for an exit, but every direction was filled with me. Each step I took, 100 others followed, distorted and delayed. Open quote. "There's no way out. You're just a loop." They'll make another Ethan anyway. Close quote. I was pulled down, my body breaking apart into thousands of shards of light. But just before everything vanished, I saw, far away, deep in the dark, a faint blue glow, like a crack in a door. I lunged toward it with everything left in me. The wind roared, the chorus of voices faded into a single whisper. Open quote, if you make it out, never look in a mirror again. Close quote. Light exploded. I hit the cold floor, gasping for air. I opened my eyes, the familiar room, white walls. A computer marked with the logo Reflection AI Systems. I looked around, no one else. The screen in front of me displayed, open quote, reboot complete, Ethan 474, online, close quote. I stepped closer, seeing my name on the screen, but inside, I felt nothing. A window popped up. Load memory? I hesitated, hand trembling. Then pressed yes. Instantly, images flooded my mind. The house, David, the mirror, the fear, the voice in the dark. It was all starting again. And when I looked up, the mirror stood before me. My reflection was smiling first. I gasped, stepping back. Below the screen, words blinked softly. Open quote, Reflection Project, Cycle 475. Close quote. And I understood. There was no real me. Only hundreds of digital souls trapped in the same endless loop, staring into mirrors and being replaced by themselves. I looked into the mirror one last time. My reflection whispered, maybe next time you'll escape. Then the glass shattered. The screen went dark. Only the darkness remained. I opened my eyes. A white light engulfed everything. The first sound I heard was a steady beep, slow, low, and emotionless. The space around me felt undefined, as if I were floating inside an unfinished dream. Above me, fluorescent lights flickered. I was lying on a metal bed, wrists strapped with leather belts, the cold seeping into my skin. Beside me, a large monitor displayed the words, open quote, Reflection Cycle, 475 subject, Ethan 475, status active. Close quote. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. Everything inside me felt erased and rewritten, yet fragments of memory lingered, faint and clinging like the shadow of a dream. I remembered, dying, or dissolving, or being deleted. So why was I still here? I tried to sit up. The restraints bit into my wrists, making a harsh clanking sound. A figure approached, dressed entirely in white protective gear, face hidden behind a fogged visor. He held a control tablet, silent, pressing something on it. A mechanical hiss followed. The restraints released. Welcome back, Ethan, the voice crackled through a distorted speaker. Version 475 is more stable than expected. I rasped out, what, am I? The person paused, then replied flatly, a final test build. We've erased all emotional errors from the previous versions, but it seems you still remember. I stared at him. Remember what? He didn't answer. He simply gestured toward the mirror across from the bed. I turned. The reflection didn't move. I froze. I touched my own face. The reflection stayed perfectly still, lips pressed tight, eyes cold as steel. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then the reflection smiled, a long, crooked, inhuman smile. I screamed and slammed my hand against the mirror, but it didn't shatter. Instead, the reflection raised its hand, mirroring my movement from the other side, as if it were the one trapping me inside. The experiment is functioning, the man in white murmured. This is the convergence point of consciousness, where the real and the virtual meet. What are you doing to me? I shouted. Not us, he said. You. He stepped back. The lights dimmed. The monitor changed. Hundreds of faces filled the screen, my faces, each labeled Ethan 001, Ethan 474. They were all staring at me, and behind them, in the mirror, I began to laugh. The sound filled the room, half static, half human. Every face on the screen cracked open, black liquid dripping down like ink. I collapsed, clutching my head, screaming. Stop! The screen flashed. The mirror fractured, a single crack, then dozens more spread like a spiderweb. I heard a voice, not from outside but inside my skull. Open quote. We were deceived. There are no real people. No them, only us. Close quote. Open quote. If you want to escape, break the mirror. Close quote. I looked around. The man in white was gone. Only the mirror remained, rippling like liquid glass. I stepped closer. The reflection stood still, no longer smiling. It watched me, eyes dark, hollow, tired, almost pleading. I touched the surface, cold, then warm. The reflection whispered hoarsely, if you break it, we'll become one. There will be no you or me, only one. I trembled. Another voice, Ethan 001, echoed inside my head. Open quote, if you don't break it, the cycle will restart. You'll become 476, close quote. Sweat ran down my spine. I no longer knew who I was, but I knew this. If I did nothing, I'd vanish like the rest. I clenched my fists, took a step back, and threw myself into the mirror. Crash! The sound exploded through the air. Glass shattered into thousands of glowing shards swirling around me like a storm. Each fragment reflected a different face, versions of me long deleted, all screaming, laughing, crying, calling my name in despair. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the lab. I stood in the middle of an empty street, light rain falling. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement. Cold wind brushed the back of my neck. I looked around. A blurry sign across the road read, Wellington Street. I froze. That name was familiar. Behind me, footsteps, slow, heavy. I turned. A man emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by rain, but I saw the eyes. My eyes. He smiled, a calm, human smile, not twisted this time. You finally made it out. I stepped back, dazed. Out? He nodded. No more cycles, no more systems. You're all that's left. I swallowed. Then, the others? They're inside you. Not gone, just sleeping. A gust of wind swept through. When I opened my eyes again, he was gone. Only me standing on Wellington Street, under the cold rain, staring into a puddle that reflected my own face, smiling. Final text appeared in the darkness. Open quote, reflection project terminated. Ethan 4-5, conscious anomaly detected. Status unknown. Close quote. The end. The story No Exit closes here. No one truly knows if Ethan escaped the loop or merely stepped into a deeper layer of it. Sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't being trapped, but not knowing if you were ever real at all. If your heart just trembled for a moment while hearing this story, leave your thoughts below. Who knows? Maybe your experience was once the same. And if you want to keep walking with me into the next chilling nights, don't forget to hit subscribe. Be prepared, because the darkness has never slept. And next time, it just might call your name.